All right, Cassandra, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming by.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I know we haven't known each other too long, just a couple weeks,
Yeah.
but what I do know about you is you're into wholesaling and you've been doing it for, I think, about 8 years or so, I think is what you told me.
Yeah.
And so I'm very intrigued to share a little bit more about wholesaling, a little bit more about you with our subscriber and our audience here. So let's start off, if you don't mind, on even like super basic. What is wholesaling? Because a lot of people don't really know what that is.
Yeah. So wholesaling is when you find a property, maybe it's a distressed seller, and you connect with an buyer, another investor, and they want to buy that property. So you're the middleman in that transaction.
Gotcha, gotcha. And you get paid for that. You're not doing that for
You,
free, right?
not for free. No, you do want to get some compensation for your time because it is some work, finding those properties. So definitely want to be
Yeah,
compensated.
there's a reason, right? Investors that want to like buy and hold a property, there's a reason sometimes that like they don't go out and spend all their time trying to find these, right? It's extremely time consuming and can be very costly, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how you market.
Yeah. It'd be another business on top of their current business, basically.
100%. Right. So a lot of long-term investors, right, rely on wholesalers to find them and they'll gladly, right, pay a fee for that.
Yeah, and
So
some investors are like, "I'll just continue to do this because that's a business within itself." And then there are some investors that, they use the term graduate or advance to other strategies in real estate.
right, right. Which is a great point you bring up, right? Because people look at wholesaling sometimes a certain way, but in all reality, it can span across the whole board, right? A lot of people sometimes do start in wholesaling because you don't have to know how to deal with tenants, right? Be a long
Yeah,
term hold investor. You can learn some of the basics, but there's also a lot of people that it is their business.
yeah, that's their bread and butter. A lot of people.
Okay. And so you've been doing it for 8 years. So that seems like, at least at this point, right? That was your intention, right?
Yeah,
Is, hey, we're wholesaling, it's working. Let's
yeah.
keep it going, right? And we'll get more into that. But yeah, catch me up to speed then. Okay. So what I know is about the 8 years.
Mhm.
Where was Cassandra before that? And how did you get into real estate?
Okay, yeah, yeah. No, so Cassandra was a recent grad and going off into the workforce, and it just wasn't resonating anymore. I think the trigger was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think for most of us, that definitely
Mhm.
reaffirmed some things and opened our eyes to different ways of thinking and just different ways of carrying out our life and how we sustain ourselves financially. So that was really what triggered the thought, and I looked at different coaching programs and different mentorships to get involved with to figure out how to do it.
Very cool. You're like, this is happening. Now I just need to know how,
Yeah,
right?
got to get the
Okay.
education.
Absolutely. So, okay, so did go to college. What did you go to college for?
I went for information systems with
Ah,
the concentration in enterprise resource planning systems. So yeah, exciting.
gotcha. Okay, so not real estate.
No, no,
Right? A lot of people, right? And when you're in real estate, right? Like there isn't a real estate degree, right? It's
no.
it's life degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
So wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so and that was about 8 years ago. So wonderful. So now you're in real estate, been doing wholesaling. How long did it take you to get your first deal when you first started getting into it?
I would say it was maybe about, I think it was a year. I think it was about a year. Yeah, I think
That's
it was
still
about a
pretty
year.
quick compared to a
Yeah,
lot of people that I talk to.
yeah, yeah. No, I was really thorough with the education, and I did a lot of watching and looking. You know how people call it the looky loo.
Right?
I did a lot of
Yeah.
that because I was just terrified of making a mistake. But I mean, I think that just comes from the education system where sometimes it hinders you, or you analysis paralysis sometimes. So that was really,
Right.
I guess, what my hold up.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, which brings up a good point, right? Like there does need there has to be some education to it,
Yeah,
right? For every person, that timeline of education between education and like pulling maybe the action,
yeah,
right? And in all reality, right, it's a bunch of little actions that you're doing, but ultimately to get that first deal or anything like that. Yeah, I talk to people like sometimes, right? They've been doing it for a long time and it just hasn't happened. And
yeah,
that could also be part time, right? For a lot of people. So that might have a little bit of effect on there. But I think that's great. 1 year, that's totally, to me, quick, right? That
Yeah.
shows, like, you're smart, you're going after it. And if you dedicate yourself, you can make a big change somewhat quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with that.
Wonderful. Okay. So where you're sitting now, tell me a little bit more about what your business looks like now.
Okay. So now we still have the wholesaling operations. It's less of us making the calls from the early days. And we actually have
Okay.
VAs that do our calling just to get the initial, green light from a seller to make sure that they do want to sell and just, qualify them a little bit. And then going out and seeing some of the properties after we've gotten them under contract and, making sure that, it is under contract for a good price. And then really building our buyers list and vetting the properties to see if they fit our buying criteria as well. So we've kind of added that now where it's not so much for our buyers, but we also focus on looking at properties for ourselves. So that's the next stage or the advancement that oftentimes
Mhm.
investors talk about. But definitely wholesaling has been really good to us.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, it's working, and you've poured some gasoline on it, right? Hiring the virtual assistants, right? The
Yeah,
VAs,
yeah,
to help you make those initial calls. I think that's fantastic. And so already, right, you have put this, your plan into action of like, hey, okay, we're wholesaling this many,
mhm,
but we want to start holding on to some of them, right?
yeah,
Add them into your portfolio, start dealing with the tenants, etc.,
yeah,
right? For some of that long-term wealth and other benefits.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Love it, right? And that is a pretty common, way to go. So my question for you would be, from where you are right now, right? You're making that not jump, because you're not necessarily leaving the wholesale side, but would you take, if you could go back and had to redo it,
Mhm.
would you take the same path?
Um, I would take the same path, but the timeline would just be a little bit different. So the jump to hold would happen sooner, much sooner.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, right? And there's always something,
Yeah,
right? Because like we aren't perfect, and we don't know what we don't know. So
yeah,
on on redoing it, um, you have the new information, right? And so it's
yeah.
like, okay, cool. That's what I would do. So love that. Okay. So you would do the same patch, just speed it up, which is
Mhm.
mostly my answer for a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. Let alone it taught me something,
Yeah,
right? I don't want to lose those valuable nuggets that I have been able to carry with me along the way.
yeah.
However, right, we learn from those failures. So when you look back,
Mhm.
what would you say a failure would be, right? That maybe you've had, that you've learned from.
Yeah, so I would say, there was one property in particular, it was amazing. And I think it was earlier on in our investing career, and I would say the commission breath ruined that deal basically. So
Okay.
you just gotta, it's like you gotta play it cool. You get somebody and you're almost like astounded at the price that they would agree to. But yeah, so I would
Mhm.
say, just really having more sales training around that time would have been really beneficial. But yeah, so it didn't work out. I think they just got nervous a little bit and they were like, "You're too excited to buy this from me." They're like, "Maybe
Yeah,
I
and
can
that
shop this
happens.
around."
Yep, yep, absolutely, and the thing is you learn from that moment, right? And you became a better salesperson, you made your adjustment,
Yes,
right? So
absolutely.
it's not like there's a better way per se, because it's like, oh, well, maybe I would have spent more time learning sales. And it's like, well, then you wouldn't have maybe gone through that experience, right?
Yeah. So it
And you might
definitely, I
not be as
mean,
good at it.
yeah, so sometimes action will cost you a little bit, but it'll help you much faster, going forward. So it would have been maybe some trainings and whatnot, and just even different tactics and strategies and pitch and tone and all that. But at the end of the day, you get out there and you take action. And I've heard different ones say you create a little chaos. Um, but then, especially if you have a community, then you can bounce back pretty quickly.
100%, 100%, right? Take everything and run with it, right? And connect with people, and you'll learn just that much faster. So Perfect. Thank you. So, and on the same mindset, right? Okay. So that was like, okay, what failure type of thing, right? So a little bit different. Okay. Life lesson, maybe. So it doesn't even have to be in real estate.
Mm.
Okay. So do you think there has been something that you have learned in your life, right, that has given you an edge a little bit in what you do?
Um, I'd say, if you see, if basically what I've observed is oftentimes your gut, your intuition is really should be your ruling factor, your ruling force. And that can be just
Mhm.
in life, relationships, different business ventures. Oftentimes there's a little inclination there for a reason. So, whether it's like, wow, this is outstanding, or it's like, I don't feel good about this. But I've just learned to kind of trust my intuition more. So that's been my guiding force.
That's fantastic, right? We definitely need to trust ourselves,
Yeah.
right? And the faster we can learn that trust, the better. So awesome. I think that's fantastic. Um, I also think that's why would someone do business with Cassandra? It's
Mhm.
because it's Cassandra, right? It's
Yeah.
because you have that gut, right? Because of your experiences that say, okay, she's analyzing the deal, right? You are doing all that. So if I, as an end buyer, I'm like, I need to get to know Cassandra,
Yeah.
right? I want to buy the properties that she locks up.
Yeah.
So perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so just a couple more things. I wanted to talk briefly about kind of introvert versus extrovert a little
Okay.
bit. Okay,
Okay.
this has just been something on my mind, personally, and I observe it in others, So in the real estate world,
Mhm.
do you think one has an advantage over the other?
Uh, that is very interesting because there's different avatars. So,
Mhm.
I think it depends on what their method is or what their strategy is. So, definitely, of course, I'd say, if you are an extrovert and door knocking and talking to sellers, it should, that flows for you. But then, there's
Uh-huh.
introverts where, they can, get the data that other people wouldn't be able to find, and they can really be able to get some niche lists and really be able to generate some deals that other people just aren't aware of. So I think it just depends on what your strategy is, because whether you're introverted or extrovert, it can benefit you tremendously in whatever path you choose. Because if you get an introvert to door knock, they're going to make $0.
Right.
And if you get somebody that's extroverted and maybe they don't have any integration abilities, and you're like, hey, just pull the data, get us some leads, they might make $0 because that's not their strong suit. And so I think it just depends on what your strategy is.
Love it, love it, and you said it perfectly because you said you choose, right? So you need to know yourself,
Mhm.
right? And then sure, maybe you want to become more extroverted, right? Or whatever, because you might not be, let's say you're trying to do the side of the extrovert, right? And you're not going to be the most extroverted person in the world regardless, right? So you're going to develop those skills that
Yeah.
are more extroverted, right? Or if you're
Yeah.
introverted, it's like, okay, develop that data mining, right?
Mhm.
Develop, right, on the brain side and organizational skills and everything that you can leverage to help you on that. So
Yeah.
100%, I thought that was said perfectly.
Yeah.
Um, this isn't like, oh my gosh, you can't be an investor
Yeah.
because
No, you
you're an
can.
introvert or an extrovert, right?
Yeah, you definitely can. You just need to be aware of what you are. And then you can grow from there, or you can remain in it and just know that you need to outsource certain things.
Right. And because initially, my initial thought, like, years ago, was, man, you have to be an extrovert, right?
Mm.
Just because I look at extroverts when they go out and they're like, man, they just seem to make things happen, right?
Yeah.
Oh, if only I could go out and talk to that many people, right? Or that bigger group, right? And it's true. They do know how to make things happen, but it's because that's the visual side. And that's why we see that, right?
Mhm.
And there's so many people that have been successful as well on the backside
Yeah.
behind, right, the scenes. So
Yeah.
awesome, awesome. Okay. So yeah, one's not better than the other. Um, do you consider yourself more an introvert or more an extrovert?
Um, I would say I am more of an introvert. It's funny because I use this term where I say I'm an introverted extrovert. So
Okay.
my preference is to just keep to myself. Um,
Mhm.
and kind of be, a little bit heads down. But if I need to do it, I can do it. I can come out of my shell. I can speak to people. I can talk to sellers. I can do all that. But my
Right.
preference is
Okay.
to
Your
to
preference is introvert, yeah, but yeah, and it doesn't take a ton out of you to do the extrovert, right? You don't feel
no,
drained and all that, right? So,
yeah,
okay, so middlevert or something,
yeah.
right? So,
It's not my preference. I'll do it, but it's not my preference.
gotcha. Yeah, it's something that I've had to work on. I am definitely also more introverted. In
Mhm.
fact, a couple years ago, I had to make a goal to become because of what I chose and
Yeah,
wanted my life to be. I designed it, right?
yeah.
So even though you could be more extroverted or introverted, and if you choose something slightly on the other side, that's
Mhm.
okay as long as you
Yeah.
know that that's how you want to design your life and go after it,
Yes, absolutely.
right? Okay.
Yep.
So what I'll give you a quick second to think. 2 skills, okay, for you, okay, that so since you have chosen to become a wholesaler, right?
Okay.
So you're introverted and extroverted, right?
Mhm.
So which one do you think is more important for what you're doing, and what 2 skills should you develop to try to better your position in that?
Okay. So for what I'm doing, I would say the extrovert is more important. Um,
Okay,
and then the skills that I would need is definitely, I would say, listening skills, especially
okay,
with dealing with sellers. You really have to be paying attention to everything that comes out of their mouth because it's valuable information, not to use against them, but just so that you can ensure that you can come up with the best solution for them, not just in terms of dollar value, but also there are other things like moving expenses or different things like that that they may mention in a conversation that could go over someone's head, but you have
right,
to really be
right.
paying attention to those
And
details
being a
because
better communicator, I think is what you're saying, right? Is you're
Mhm,
like, "Hey, listening to we talk,
mhm.
but full communication is listening as well, so you can understand the whole thing."
Yeah, yeah, and then I'd say you need to have some for me with the comping and the underwriting all that. So you definitely need to
Uh-huh.
have some analytical skills to be able to take the time to analyze these deals because you can then from a wholesaling perspective, you can push a deal that is not a deal. It's really just a property that you have under contract, and nobody
Yeah,
wants it because of the price. So you maybe didn't factor in the condition or location, different things like that, to really be able to come up with a good price for yourself or your end buyers. So either you can get yourself into some trouble, or you'll just get a deal that's stale and not a deal.
right. Super important, right? You just have a house that exists,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's
you got
not
somebody that said they want to
helpful.
sell it and the price is not good, and so you just got somebody that wants to sell it and they're not motivated.
Absolutely. Very well said. And that happens all too often. I get tons of emails from wholesalers, and I'm like, "Yep, not even close,
Not a deal.
not even close to a deal, right?" And now, given sometimes there's buyers that maybe would buy a little higher price, right?
Yeah,
We're talking a little bit of on the cash perspective of
yeah,
wholesaling, right? Is that mainly what you wholesale, or do you wholesale some creative, or just cash,
mainly
or what?
cash, mainly cash. Yeah, and you're right. There are those buyers that will pay the higher price. Typically, those are the hedge funds. So those are usually our go-tos first.
Right?
But yeah, they typically will pay the higher price because they have it.
Yeah, makes exactly. Their numbers, right, work
Mhm.
better because they have that much money that they have to deploy, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
still get a return, right? So that
Mhm.
makes sense. They're not trying to get that livable wage and
No.
right? And all
No, no,
those
the goal is a certain amount of properties, a certain amount of income a month, so they typically have a little more leeway than the average investor.
got it. Okay, got it. Um, okay. So then with where you're at, and either in continuing wholesaling or maybe it's the adding the rentals to your portfolio, what would you say when you sit back and you go, "What's my biggest challenge?" What's your biggest challenge right now?
Um, I think it's really deal flow, honestly. I think it's a unique spot that we're in the market, and we've got some sellers that we come across when our VAs are reaching out, and I think they're just indecisive on, is it really a good time? Could I just try to manage this myself? Or so some of them are just, they're undecided. So really getting the deals that's the biggest challenge. So definitely looking
Gotcha.
to
Okay.
partner with some wholesalers that are having better luck than us. But yeah.
Okay. So, so if there's somebody listening, right, or watching right now, right, like, okay, how can they provide value to you? Then your biggest challenge right now is deal flow.
Yeah.
So, and being a wholesaler, a little unique, right? Because you kind of got deal flow on both sides almost, right? That you could say it's, hey, got to find the deals. So if
Yeah.
somebody else finds a deal, hey, call up Cassandra, right?
Hmm.
Or if you're a buyer,
Yeah.
right, they should reach out to you, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's we increase that, we can help Cassandra overcome that obstacle and
Yeah.
get you having these additional rental properties. I love that.
For
I would
sure.
love to
Yeah.
see that happen very, very quickly here.
Yeah.
Okay. So over the next 5 years then, okay, I know you're starting to do the rental, so I think
Mhm.
I partially have this answer. But
Okay.
what does your business look like 5 years from now?
5 years from now, we are definitely we've definitely acquired several properties at this point. And we
Okay.
have a solid property management company that we're working with to handle a lot of those, but it'll mainly be the MTRs. So we'll have more relationships with insurance companies and hospitals. So we'll definitely have those properties hopefully staffed out, each one I would say about 6 to 9 months, 12 months, so longer terms. And then consistently adding to the portfolio with properties that do come in, because we will still have the wholesaling entity to be our first means of acquiring properties.
Mhm.
And then also lending. So we have started some lending as well. We have EMD funding, transactional funding, and then we have some bridge loans and construction loans. So we have all
Oh,
that set up. So
fantastic.
that's why when you ask,
Okay.
capital is not the problem. It's just getting
Right.
more and more.
Yeah, just ramping up even to a higher level
Yeah,
and it sounds to me like in all directions, right?
yeah, yeah,
Everything that you currently have established,
yeah,
right? It's, hey, whatever amount you're wholesaling right now, you want to be wholesaling more,
yeah.
and then you want to be holding on to some more. And and then I do want to unpack a few terminology things right there real quick, right? The first thing you said was MTR, right?
Yeah.
What's an MTR?
An MTR is a midterm rental. So typically, everyone's familiar with the Airbnbs, which are typically short-term rentals. And then you have your
Mhm.
traditional rentals, which are long-term rentals. So typically, a year. Some midterm, long-term rentals you can do month to month, but typically 1 year. So in between that, you've got the medium term or midterm rentals, which are 30 days or more.
Gotcha, gotcha. And that's why you said, okay, hospitals, right? Pilots, right? You have these people that have a need bigger than 30 days, right?
Yeah,
But less than a year,
yeah,
right?
and it's
Okay.
typically not cost effective for them to do hotels or different things like that because it adds up quite a bit. And so,
Yep.
so yeah, the
Yeah, a daily
medium
fee,
term,
right? A daily type fee, right, is
absolutely,
way more expensive, right? So
absolutely,
so it's finding that middle ground on cost too, right?
yeah.
So that makes sense. Okay, fantastic. Um, okay, so I also want to know what and this is something I want to ask, pretty much every guest that I have come on. Okay. So, and I'll give you a second. I didn't prep you before. Okay. So, what I'm going to ask is, okay. Is there a book that you'd recommend, right, to our subscribers to read? Is there a podcast or YouTube channel, okay, that you'd recommend? And the last part will be, is there a person, right, that you'd recommend that they go and follow, that maybe it's had an effect on you, right? To help them get to the next level, right? And it doesn't matter where they are. It could be, in your similar shoes or coming from a different angle.
Yeah, so I would say, definitely depends on, where you are, but I think it's beneficial also too to even revisit some things. So like I mentioned with that first book, The Rich Dad Poor Dad, I think
Mhm.
that's a staple for sure. But the key thing is revisiting Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I recently did, because you're going to get a lot more out of it as you've done some things in your career, whether that's on the entrepreneurship side or even in your, even if you're in a 9 to 5, it'll get those wheels turning again as well, because time goes by, circumstances change, and things they maybe resonate a little bit more, or they're actually more implementable or more actionable at a different point in your life. So for sure, I would say that book. And then, I think because, Bigger Pockets is great. That's probably one that's very popular. But there is a plethora of people on there. And of course, Pace Morby, he's been on there as well. So you can kind of get
Right.
a taste for him. And then of course he has his own podcast too. So he's a great one. And then I believe, what was the last thing again?
The person
Okay, yeah.
that you think maybe they should follow.
Yeah, so I led into it unintentionally, but yeah. So I would say, yeah, Pace Morby for sure. He's definitely a great resource, and he's also very, he's accessible. I don't know if you've DM'd him or even spoken, but he's very responsive. So I would say he's a kind of good person to, especially if you're going into real estate, definitely to have in your back pocket.
Awesome. And this proves how good your answers are, right? Because when they mix like that, it's because there's synergy, right? It's like, oh, Go Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? Absolutely. And like that was one of the first books I read, right? And that a lot of investors, like you said, will have that, so such a good one, right? Anyone listening or watching, right? Go read that book if you haven't yet, right? There's a reason it's like changed so many people's lives, right? And then, okay, so on Bigger Pockets, also a huge fan. So we'll put some links down below. That way people can click and go follow those or subscribe to them. Because they have also played a huge part of my life, right? On the Pace Morby side, right? Like to be honest, I haven't even known the guy for very long, even though I've been investing for a long time.
Yeah.
And I have been amazed and wowed at what he's been able to bring and mindset, right? And change. And now he's more of a creative guy, right?
Yeah.
Which I think, right, is kind of expanding a lot of people's perspective. So
Yeah.
absolutely, we'll link to all of those. So thank you very much for sharing that. And then just so based on everything else that you've talked about, there's going to be people that are going to want to reach out to you. Okay.
Oh,
Whether
awesome.
it's, hey, just connect with you, ask you how they can help you. So how can they find you? Where can they get your information?
Yeah, so I've got it all in a link tree on my Instagram. So cass.o.m. Yeah, that's how you can reach me. And then I'm Cassandra McCullough on YouTube.
Wonderful. We're going to become best friends, Cassandra, in case
Yeah,
you were unaware.
yeah, I know. I feel it.
Love it. So awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute great time. I'm looking forward to, and this is exactly what I wanted to do by starting the podcast, so I can actually become good friends with everyone that I interview, right? And then also just help everybody else. So thank you so much, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.